Welcome to this new tutorial series where we're going to create a basketball game, more specifically a three-point shootout. So before we start creating the new project, I just wanted to lay out the flow board here just so you can see what's going to be incorporated in this game. It's not going to be super complex. There's actually only two game modes and a shell menu. The first is not even a game mode. The first screen that the player is going to see is the main menu screen. It's going to have a button for play, practice, and then the instructions are actually going to be on the screen, so this isn't really going to be a button, but this is where the instructions will be, and then a quit button. So the only three options are to play, practice, and quit. Whether you click play or practice, I forgot to put that in there, it will go to the main game mode, where if they click play, it'll actually have a timer, so it'll have a countdown, and the player will have to make three-point baskets on a basketball court. If it's a practice, the main game mode will not have a timer. The player can just go through and shoot as many shots as they'd like. And then they can bring up a shell menu. If they are actually playing the game when the timer expires, the level will complete and it'll go into the shell menu, where if they got a high score, it'll display here. They'll be able to put in their name into a leaderboard, and then they have two options. They can click a restart button or a main menu button. If they restart, it's going to go back into the main game mode and they can replay. If they hit main menu, they go back to the main menu and then they can select practice or quit. So that's how the game's going to be set up. Just wanted you to see that so you can see the overall layout. So now what you can do is open up Unity. So with that icon, if you double click it to open it up, if you don't get to the new project screen, if it opens up one of your old projects, we're going to go ahead and create a new one. So go to File, New Project. All right, it should bring up this Project Wizards. This is what you want to see. You can rename it here. So let's go ahead and rename it 3-Point Shootout. I don't like any spaces in my file names, so I never do that with any files that I create in Unity. We are going to want the character controller package and the particles package. Later on we might be introducing some particles. If we don't get there, it's not a big deal. It's not going to take up a whole lot of space. And I believe those are the only two assets we need. So go ahead and click create. It'll go ahead and create that new project. Okay, here's our new project. Go ahead and move these windows around to wherever you want. Remember, you can save your own layup here in the top right hand corner by clicking the Save Layout button. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is just set up our project so it's ready to go so we can start creating our main level. That's what we're going to start with. So what we want to do first is create our folders here on the right hand side so we can get set up and keep everything nice and neat. You can already see the standard assets that were imported. The two packages we chose are the character controllers and the particles. All nice and neat in these two little folders. We'll keep them there until we need them. So under Assets, I'm going to right click on Assets, go to Create, Folder, and we're going to create some folders that we're going to need. So I know we're going to need a Materials folder. Right click on Assets again, Create Folder. I know we're going to need a Textures folder. And we'll just keep doing this. We'll need a Prefabs folder. We'll need a Scenes folder. And eventually we are going to add audio in, so we'll go ahead and put in an audio folder. All right, you might need more later, but leave it at that. Let's go ahead and save a scene so we don't lose our progress so far. So let's go ahead and up into File, Save Scene As, and we want to go ahead and select our Scenes folder. And I'm just going to call this Game. Okay, you can call it whatever you want, it doesn't really matter, just remember what you call it because we'll need it later. Alright, if I look in my Scenes folder, there it is. So when we start to create our level, we're actually going to use a plane to represent the floor. So we'll go into Create and Plane. Alright, you can make it as big as you want. I'm going to do 2 by 2 by 2. That looks good. Alright, and this is going to be the basketball court that the player is going to play on. It looks kind of bland right now. I'm going to turn on the lighting effects and see how dark it is. That's because there's no light in the scene. So we'll do that next. Create a directional light. And make sure that your positioning icon here is on global. If it's local, it's going to be using the local positioning of the object. We want to be in global. We just move it up. Okay, you can rotate it if you want to using the gizmo on the top left. I'm going to leave it how it is for now. I'm actually going to change the name of this. Again, I don't like any spaces in my object names, so I'm taking that out. We actually don't need this main camera. We'll go ahead and take that out. What we are going to use is what's in the standard assets. So if I open this up, the reason we imported the character controllers is because we're actually going to use this first person controller. Alright, so if you just drag this out and bring it into your scene, right now it just looks like a capsule. I'm going to bring it up a little bit so it doesn't fall through plane there, so it's a little bit above the ground. This should be enough to get the game up and running. If I go ahead and play test this, right away I can move the mouse and rotate the player, and I can move, and it works. It's kind of hard to tell that I am moving because the plane is very white, but we'll change that in a little bit. I am moving around and rotating. Pretty easy to get that up and running. However, these scripts are a little bit more complicated than we need, and plus the whole point of this class is to get you to understand a little bit behind the programming as well. So even though we do have this object and we kind of pulled it in there, we're just going to use the template of it, and we're actually going to get rid of a lot of these components. So on this first person controller, the first thing I'm going to do is change the name of it. This is going to be the player. So we're going to remove these scripts. So I'm going to click on the gear here and click remove component. I'm just going to go through and remove these components. So we do not need any of the scripts, and we do not need the character controller. So there should only be a transform component on the player. If I click on the graphics, this is a common way to create game objects in Unity, where all of your components are actually going to be on the parent object called player, and any of the meshes or graphics which you're actually going to see on the character is under a different child. If I were to disable the graphics, you would still be able to move the player around, well, if we still have the components attached, and do all the other things that the components allow you to do without having to see the player. Okay, it's a good way to change different styles. For example, if the player changes hair color. Alright, so I'm actually going to change this to mesh, because that's all it is. It's the mesh that shows the physical objects. And I'm just going to change this, take out the space, so it's main camera. Alright, and this camera actually has a mouse look script on it. We're going to remove this as well. So right click, or I'm sorry, just left click the gear and click remove component. Alright, notice that it is blue. It's a prefab. We don't want to click apply for that prefab though, because it'll take over this first person controller. We want to leave that as is. So let's create a new prefab by just dragging the player, this whole thing, and we'll drag it into our prefabs folder down here. If we look in our prefabs folder, we have our prefab, and we can pull out as many of these as we want, just like we did with the collectible. Alright, but we don't need all these, so I'll do it. Alright, the next thing we need to do is to add in some textures and also the basketball. Alright, let's put in the basketball first. So pretty easy. Create sphere. Alright, drag that around. There it is. You can change the size if you want to. Once we get the textures on and we start play testing, you can change the size of these objects as well. Alright, pretty simple. To add in the textures, we're actually going to use some textures that I have either pre-made or found, free assets. Look for those links in the YouTube comments. Go ahead and download those assets and make sure you have them available, and then we'll go ahead and import it. Before I lose any progress, I'm going to go ahead and save scene and save project. Alright, so in my textures folder, I'm just going to click on it, and then over here in the empty folder, I'm going to right click, import new asset, and I'm going to go ahead and find those assets that I told you to download. For me, I put them in a folder called textures on my desktop. So I'm going to open that up, and there they are. There's our 4 files. This one is for the basketball. This one is for the court. We have just a black texture. That's what's going to be on the outside of the basketball court for now, until we find some other textures. And then a crosshair, so you can see exactly where you're pointing the basketball. Alright, so we want to import all of these, so I'm just going to click on them one at a time. Click on import, and it'll put the texture right in. Right click again, import new asset, import the court. have them all imported. So to create materials for these, one of the easiest ways to do it is to just grab the texture and drag it over onto the object. So the b-ball texture will be on the basketball. So even though this is a texture, it does create a material in our materials folder. How awesome is that? So if you click on that, notice the texture that it's using here. If you don't like the color that's showing up there, if it's a little pale for you, feel free to change the color here. You can change the color to blue, white, red, whatever you want to do. Alright, I'll just change it back to white. Alright, we'll do the same thing for the court. We'll go ahead and grab that court texture, drag it on there, bam, there's your basketball court. Pretty easy. If you look in your materials folder, there's your court material. And I'm going to go ahead and change this name to basketball. And I'll change the plane to floor. The last thing I want to do is import the prototype asset that we've already included before. If you don't have it already loaded up, just go back into the asset store by clicking Window, Asset Store. It'll take about 6 years to load. Once it boots up for you, go ahead and log in the right hand corner. Once you get logged in, we don't have to download any more assets. We can just click on this icon right here. It'll bring up all the different assets that we've already downloaded. I apparently have a lot. You shouldn't have too many unless you've done some on your own. You want to scroll down to where you see prototype, and if it says update here on the right hand side, go ahead and click that, similar to what this asset is doing. If it just says download, we don't need to re-download it, we just want to import it. So update it if need be, and then import. It'll bring up this box, it'll show everything that's importing. Don't touch any of that, just click import. It'll take a few moments to import these assets. Once that's done, you can close out of the asset store. We won't need it anymore. And you'll see under your assets folder, we have a Procore folder. Same thing as what happened last time. Do not move this folder anywhere. Don't put anything in it. Don't take anything out. We need it just as is for the asset to work correctly. Alright, so now if we go up to the top left, you'll see a new icon that appeared. If it doesn't, just click this gray bar here. It should come back up. Click Tools, Prototype, and we want the prototype window. Alright, right here, this is where it was. For some reason it has an error, so I'm just going to click on this icon right here to close the tab, and I'm going to drag this one back over. Alright, good as new. And this is how we're going to create the hoop for the basketball game. We're going to use this prototype, and we'll do that in the next tutorial. Go ahead and manipulate any of the objects if you want to. Get it looking the way you want to for this tutorial, and in the next one we'll go ahead and start up some scripts.